Hello, my name is Paul Sandrock, ACTFL Director of Education. Welcome to this webinar, which is offered as part of ACTFL's response to the changed educational environment in which language educators at all levels find themselves working today. The move to teaching and learning remotely is challenging. ACTFL thanks all of you for the tremendous and creative effort you are putting forth to support your learners. Today's webinar is led by Nicole Naditz. Nicole taught French at Bella Vista High School in Sacramento, California, and is currently the Instructional Technology Program Specialist for that district, the San Juan Unified School District. Nicole was also our ACTFL 2015 National Language Teacher of the Year and shared then her philosophy, quote, "To prepare and inspire tomorrow's citizens and to promote language fluency and cultural understanding, language and culture must be inextricably linked. My lessons, practice activities, assessments, and the real and virtual learning spaces that I curate exemplify this belief." Well, here to take us to those real and virtual learning spaces in this webinar, Going the Distance, Tools and Strategies for Online Teaching and Learning, let's welcome Nicole.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I am so thrilled to see all of you here this evening, and really thank you for both joining us and for taking this additional time. I know firsthand exactly how much work you are all putting in every single day in order to make this happen in a meaningful way for your learners. So this evening, we'll be looking at both some tools and strategies related to online teaching and learning, with some specific examples, obviously, in the world languages area. And let's get started. I know a lot of you might have seen this coming and realized that we were going to have to move from perhaps doing review and practice activities to actually teaching new content. And you could almost feel the stress rising up. And so the first thing I actually really want to leave you with before we even get started, is, there we go, to breathe. Because it's important to realize that this is new for almost everybody. It's almost like being a first-year teacher again, and fortunately many of you in the room have some experience teaching and designing lessons, but doing it in this format is brand new. Students and families do understand that this situation didn't provide the time or space to become experts at this model of teaching and learning. So it's hard to do this because we tend to be perfectionists and we hold ourselves to such a high standard. But don't worry about making mistakes. First of all, they are actually going to happen. Some of you might have experienced some mistakes already. In the end, it will be okay. We're just going to keep learning and keep moving forward. And we know that we're really trying to do this work way faster than it ever would have been done if any of us at our schools had been at a school that said, you know what, I think we'll become a distance learning academy. Well, you wouldn't do that in 3 weeks. You would take 2 years to transition from being a physical school to a distance learning academy. So this is a huge lift. And part of my role here tonight is to help take that huge lift and hopefully soften it a little bit by focusing on not just tools, but strategies. And so one of the things that a lot of teachers find themselves asking is kind of, where do I start? There's so much, and there's so much technology that people are sending me via email and so on. And I don't know where to start. And really where you want to start is by thinking about how it is that you're going to be able to build and foster and sustain a learning community in this virtual space the way you were doing in your physical classrooms. Not that it will look like it did in your physical classrooms, but it is almost more important now to ensure that students feel like they are part of a community. And I know from, so many of my friends around the country who are language teachers as well, and who've been sharing the strategies that they're using, this is really a core value for us. So one of the things you can do is don't necessarily rush out to try all the new tools, but instead look at the features of the online platforms that you already have access to. If you're in a school district, you might want to start with the one that your school district already supports. It may have been one that's been available to you all along, but that you didn't need to use before when you were in your physical classroom space. Most of those online platforms even Google Classroom, which is not a true learning management system, have some way to post information, to share resources, to post a message of encouragement and support to your learners. They also have a way to do a discussion board so that you can bring in those student voices. It's at least as important to allow our learners a chance to share as it is to share information ourselves. But the key here is to harness whatever tool you're using in your district or that you have access to in order to do that. And so some teachers in my district, we've given teachers a lot of autonomy to kind of choose the path that works for them in terms of how they will keep in contact with their students and their families. So some are using Google Classroom. We don't have a learning management system in my district. Some are using tools called Remind, which is like a text messaging tool, Class Dojo, which is another messaging tool, Seesaw. All of those actually allow you to send content out to your students. And so in addition to practice activities and in addition to lessons, we want to make sure that we're also sending content that checks in on them in a social and emotional way and that supports and uplifts and sustains them. And if possible, if the tool you're using allows it, also allows them to be part of the community by sharing. And so that's the next piece. If the tools that you're using make it possible to do so, invite your learners to share with each other in that communal space. Invite them to post appropriate target language memes, songs, interesting images from the places in the world where your target languages are spoken. They can also post, older learners can post charts and infographics that are in the target language related to the content that they are studying. They can respond to what you have posted and what others have posted, and they can pose questions. Now, at this point, you've already got their voices in the room and you're already doing so much just by posting and sharing, right? And you haven't even started talking about audio and video and those technologies yet. But you might be wondering, yeah, that sounds great, but what if the kids mess up? What if the kids make a bad decision? What if they share something that I wish they had never shared? One important thing is to look in your tool. I'll use Google Classroom as an example. In Google Classroom, you can actually mute individual students. For those of you who have Google Classroom, once you open it, it's in your People tab. You can select a student and mute them so that they can't continue to post. You can also not only delete their posts, but you can look through deleted items if they posted something when you didn't happen to be online. Their posts are associated with their name in almost any one of these tools. Whatever tools your schools are using, their post is going to be associated with their name. So remember that that does add a layer of accountability. And at a point, we could find ourselves needing to have that digital citizenship conversation with them about appropriate interactions and behavior in online communities and why it is that they cannot continue to have the privilege of posting and sharing content in that community and how they can earn that privilege back. That allows the rest of the class who's doing just fine. The vast majority of our students are going to do just fine. They're going to be excited to share a song that they saw, that they ran across in the target language and so on. That allows them to continue sharing in that community while the student who is having trouble can have some time to get a better understanding of what appropriate participation in these spaces looks like and begin working towards regaining that that responsibility and that level of access. Now, for those of you who are using Google Classroom, and I do say this because I just know there are so many schools and districts across the country that are using it. I did want to share with you that when you get the PDF of this slide deck, you will have access to every link that is in it and all of the resources that are linked, which is quite a lot. But one thing to know that sometimes people forget to mention, while our students are at home, and this is true of other tools as well, while our students are at home, many of them are using devices that they have within their families. So a personal device, not necessarily a device that was managed by your school district. If that's the case, they may not have ever tried to access things like Google Classroom or Schoology or Canvas or whatever on a personal device before. So when they do it, it's important to communicate to your learners that they need to get the app if they are using a phone or a tablet, for whatever tools it is that your district is using. So the reason you need an app is because phones and tablets are not optimized to use the web-based version of these tools. And your students were probably using something like a Chromebook at school and they could use the web-based version, right? Now they're at home, they may not have access to that same technology. They're using the technology they have in their household, which could be a single phone for the whole family. And they might run into frustration because when they try to go to the web and click on the link for Google Classroom, it doesn't work. They can't submit assignments. It's clunky. If they put the app for Google Classroom on their phone or the app for Schoology and so on, it will work much, much better. So do remember to encourage your students to ensure that they download the app that is appropriate for the phone or tablet that they are using, if that's how they're going to access. When you get the PDF of this slide deck, you will also have access to a very rich resource document specifically for Google Classroom for those of you who are using it. We're going to move into some considerations for your lesson design. It's not everything about lesson design. It's not a complete lesson from beginning to end, but a couple of really key points. Because when it comes down to it, it's the design of the lesson that will determine the success of it. And it's not just about the technology at all. So you want to leverage your technology tools, as we'll talk about in a minute, but you want to design for learning. It always needs to start with learning first, technology second, which is actually a great book, by the way, with that same title. So we were talking a moment ago about using whatever classroom tool your school has provided, if they've provided one such as Schoology or Canvas or Google Classroom. Now we're going to talk about the tools to create and design and share our lessons. When we were in our classrooms, some of you might have used the whiteboard as kind of the place where you prepared for students what it was that you wanted them to know and focus on, and you might have used different colored pens on your whiteboard and so on. And now you're at home and going, oh, I don't know how to do that in this space. There are some virtual whiteboard tools, but I'm going to start this conversation with tools on our computers that are designed for creating presentations, for a variety of purposes, including schools and students. For example, tools like PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slides. I prepared this presentation in Google Slides, for example. And a really important consideration is you're designing learning that's going to happen at a distance. Learning where your students can't just raise their hand immediately and tell you that they have a question because maybe they're going to watch a recorded video of this lesson. Learning where you can't look around the room as you're teaching in order to be able to say, ooh, I see some quizzical looks. It looks like I've lost a few. In this setting, you're not able to do that. So we really want to harness the features of the presentation tool that we're using in order to best focus their attention to hopefully minimize those moments of confusion so that they don't ever happen. And then in order to provide them with opportunities to process that learning. So PowerPoint is from Microsoft. Keynote is an Apple product. Google Slides is a Google product. They are essentially what are called slide decks tools. And so one of the things you're going to want to do is prepare your lesson ahead of time by putting some information on each slide, like I did for tonight's presentation. It's really important when you do that, that you chunk the content and build in checks for understanding. So what might have been a 25 or 30 or 40-minute lesson in your physical classroom, if you're going to make a slide deck and possibly even record a video of yourself kind of talking through that slide deck, by the time your students pause the video, take some notes, listen some more, pause the video, try a check for understanding, resume the video, listen some more, that just became a really long time on one lesson on a computer screen in their home. And to be honest, not only is it difficult on their brains and just from how brain science works, but right now we're finding a lot of families are at home where there is one device, multiple kids trying to do online learning, and family members trying to work from home remotely, and sometimes they're all sharing that device. So when we chunk a lesson, it can actually really help because it keeps the lesson a little bit shorter. With that actually supports what we know from brain science about what's called primacy and recency, because the brain most remembers the first thing it heard and the last thing it heard. and everything else in the middle gets a little bit wishy-washy, right? Well, if we make our chunks of lessons smaller, everything is either the first or last thing they heard, and then they're given some processing time. So even though it sounds like it will take more time, in the end, you're going slow to learn faster and learn better. So break your lesson into small chunks. A big vocab lesson, you might only do a chunk of the first 5 words, for example, and then you're going to build in checks for understanding. In addition, you want to use the features of the tool. So the tool can help you chunk, and it can help you build in checks for understanding, but it can also help you focus their attention. I could have put this slide up in front of you with everything I intend to talk about all visible at once from the very beginning. But we all know that's probably not going to be effective, because while I was busy talking about just the title, everybody else was reading the whole slide deck and not listening really, because your brain doesn't really read and listen well at the same time. So we want to use tools to focus learner attention, such as animating words and objects to appear when you want them to, which is what I've been doing, so that things come in one at a time as I'm speaking. These tools also give you a way to use color, bold, and underline to focus their attention. We did that a lot in our classes with the different colored whiteboard markers. We need to do the same thing when we are designing digital versions of the content we might have presented in those other ways. We want to make sure we provide visual support for the printed and oral language that they will hear as well. And of course, these tools make it really easy to insert images that will support our learners' understanding. So I'm going to share just one of the easiest kinds of checks for understanding that you can build in. One of the things to know about this is you have to imagine we're not going to demonstrate the whole lesson. So this was a lesson for a first-year French class. I taught mostly high school. And the students are learning how to talk about activities that they like and don't like to do. So they're learning the basics of that big group. For those of you who teach French or Spanish, you know this group of verbs, right? They learn how to talk about whether or not they like to sing, whether or not they like to dance, what they like to eat, and so on. So they're learning those as a vocabulary chunk, right? They kind of memorize the part that means I like, and then they memorize the activity word to throw at the end. I like to eat. I like to sing. I don't like to dance, whatever it is. So you need to know that the first part of the lesson has already happened entirely in French. It was supported with visuals and so on. And then in the video part of the lesson, I give my students a visual cue with a pause signal that says, uh-oh, it's time for me to do something now as the student. And I'm going to give my students information in French that says, pause the video, take a look at the 3 pictures and the 3 words, and just quickly decide which word you think goes with each picture. Now, those of you who teach French or Spanish, you know that this lesson is composed of a lot more than 3 words. So initially, I'm just doing the first 3. I will probably do 3 more in this little mini version of the lesson, right? And then I'm going to end that video lesson. So I've done the first 3 words. I've supported it with models, lots of pictures and examples. And I was talking and, pausing, even pretending that they were in class with me and telling them to repeat and to try the sentences with me, even if they're watching on video. And then I tell them, pause, take a look at the 3 pictures, take a look at the 3 words, and decide which word goes with each picture. When you're ready, resume the video. So they pause the video, they look. Some kids might write it down, others won't. And then you resume the video. We don't go on to the next 3 words yet. Instead, we make sure the students know how they're doing. Are they doing okay? Did they know which words went with which picture? If so, you're ready to keep going with the lesson. Congratulations, good job. If you had trouble with this activity, please review the first part of the lesson before continuing. And then the lesson can continue with the next 3 words, another check for understanding on those, and then another check for understanding that kind of uses all 6. And I'm probably going to call that little video done. And I'll pick up in another lesson with the next chunk of words from that whole lesson that has something like 15 or 20 different activities in it, right? So I'm going to break it up into much smaller chunks so that if their internet goes out, they get interrupted, they suddenly have to help take care of somebody in the family, someone else needs the computer, they don't have to be on a device that long, and everything is practically the first or last thing they heard. So it's going to support their retention of those words. And the fact that I paused and made them do something is going to further support their retention, because we didn't just keep adding words. We gave them a chance to stop, process, check their understanding, and know if they're getting it before they move on. So another, we get a lot of questions as those of us who, teach language and then have an opportunity to work with other language teachers. We always get a lot of questions about what to do with grammar. So at this point, I'm actually going to do much quicker than I would normally do, but I'm going to show you a little model in French of kind of a first-year grammar topic. It's important to understand that this lesson would have occurred after the lesson where they learn these words as a vocabulary word that they can attach to a sentence with I like to eat, I like to sing, I don't like to dance, right? And now we're moving into how to say statements about ourselves and others with those activities. I sing or I don't sing, I dance, I eat, right? And then as we know, that typically moves on eventually to saying we sing, you all sing, they sing, right? Or they don't. So often when this is presented for the first time in our instructional materials, for those who are using the instructional materials, it's often presented kind of all 6 commonly used pronouns at once. We're going to learn about the regular verbs today, and here's how you do it for je, which is I. Here's how you do it for you, singular. Here's how you do it for he and she. Here's how you do it for you, plural. Here's how you do it for, or we, sorry. Here's how you do it for you, plural, and here's how you do it for they. End of lesson. Let's do some practice because you got this. Well, remember what we said earlier. Chunking is critically important. The students don't need to know all 6 of these at once. So we're going to look at a little demonstration, remembering that they already know the meaning of these activity words, so they're focusing on something different now. I will be speaking in French for a little bit. It will go much faster than I would normally go in class. I'd like you to kind of notice what's happening on the visual side. What have I done to help people focus on what they need to do? And even if you don't speak French, are you able to tell what I ask them to do at the end of this mini chunk in order to process that learning? Okay, so here we go. Bonjour, on va parler de mes activités. Par exemple, je joue au basket et je nage. Je m'appelle Nicole, j'ai 15 ans et voici mes activités. Je regarde la télé avec ma famille après le dîner. Je travaille pour préparer les classes. Quand je ne travaille pas, je chante, je joue aux jeux vidéo et j'écoute la musique. Oh, classe, jouer aux jeux vidéo? Voilà l'image. OK, classe. Encore. Mais maintenant, vous écoutez, vous notez la forme et la prononciation. D'accord? Donc, vous notez la forme et la prononciation. Oh. Bonjour, je m'appelle Nicole, j'ai 15 ans et voici mes activités. Je regarde la télé avec ma famille. Je travaille pour préparer les classes. Quand je ne travaille pas, je chante, je joue aux jeux vidéo, j'écoute la musique. Je regarde, je travaille, je ne travaille pas, je chante, je joue, j'écoute. Classe, vous avez observé? Jouer au tennis, je joue avec eux. Alors, à vous, prenez une feuille de papier, formez des phrases avec je pour parler de vos activités. Vous continuez, vous formez des phrases pour étudier, danser, écouter la musique et regarder la télé. Alors, arrêtez la vidéo et écrivez, et puis continuez la vidéo quand vous avez fini. So at this point, the students are stopping the video. They're going to try it along the lines of the model. And then when they think they're ready, they're going to continue. And as you might predict, I'm going to make sure they know if they did okay. Alors, bravo classe, merci beaucoup. Voilà les réponses. J'étudie avec eux. Je danse avec eux. J'écoute la musique avec eux. Je regarde la télé avec eux. So at this point, I may or may not finish the video right here and do a second chunk. And my preference for the second chunk, for those of you who teach a language that has verb conjugations, is actually to do tu. And that's because the most important thing for my learners right now is to be able to communicate at a novice level. And much of that communication involves speaking with another person. So knowing how to talk about themselves using some memorized words and phrases, and how to ask simple questions of someone or make statements to someone. Then we might do another whole chunk. It would be a different chunk about using these in a question so that they can use to with questions. Then another chunk of a lesson or a separate video would be how to use it for he and she, so that when you ask a question to somebody, you're able to tell someone else what he or she said, right? Sometimes I skip he and she and go straight to we, especially in our physical classrooms, because once we do I and you, either one of those two people in that conversation is then able to say what we both do. So that could be a logical next step. But as you can see, what I'm not going to do is actually try to teach all 6 forms. I don't even tell them that I'm conjugating. I don't use the word conjugation. We're focused on how to communicate and how to use these sentences right now to just talk about ourselves and activities that we do. For those of you who speak French, you also noticed, although I gave one example in the negative, and they've seen that negative before with I don't like, je n'aime pas, I'm not yet focusing on it per se. I'm getting them comfortable with using those new words for their daily activities in order to make sentences about themselves. And that is a sufficient chunk for now. We can actually practice that with a number of activities before we even add the next chunk. So we can build that in with the way we design our slides. We can build that in so that they have this opportunity to not only get information from the teacher about this new structure or about this new set of words, but they're also being gifted with the opportunity to get some practice and know immediately how they're doing. No pressure, no grades, no points. It's just a chance for them to check for themselves how they're doing, whether or not they're doing okay. So that's just using tools built into Google Slides. Similar tools exist for both PowerPoint and Keynote if you prefer to use those. The key again is to remember to break your content into smaller chunks and maybe have multiple videos for what used to be one lesson. Provide checks for understanding of each chunk, and be sure to include the responses or sample responses so that students have a way of knowing if they're doing okay. And something I mentioned earlier, really leveraging or harnessing that tool in order to make sure you focus the learner attention instead of, for example, showing all of this at once and then talking while I show it, because the kids aren't sure what I want them to focus on, because now there's just a whole lot of letters on the page. Yeah, there's some of them in another color, but ultimately there's just a whole lot of words there. Whereas if things come in one at a time and I'm speaking each time, they can kind of look at it and go, huh, well, I've seen that word. I've seen regarder. I think I know what that means. I know regarder la télé, right? And now I'm going to bring in the second one. So that can be very important, an easy change and a powerful change in order to help our learners know what it is we're trying to get them to do without even having to use English. Okay. So there are a lot of additional tools for checking for understanding. Now I want to caution you here. This distance learning scenario has led to a whole lot of instructional technology companies being very helpful. They're offering the full versions of their tools for free. They're sending us emails all the time with all the amazing tools and resources they have. And they're not wrong. There's a lot of great tools out there. This isn't Pokemon. You don't have to use them all. So you want to be really selective. At first, especially if teaching with technology is new to you, don't try any more new tools for at least a week, maybe 2 weeks, if you're still learning how to use Keynote, PowerPoint, slides, or another tool to prepare these kinds of lessons. You can build in some checks for understanding right here without having to learn another tool you haven't used very much before. But once you've kind of got that down and that's feeling more comfortable, then you're ready to maybe kind of branch out and see if there's another tool that can be helpful to you and to your learners. In this case, for just checking for understanding. And the nice thing about using some of these tools is in many cases, you can get some information for yourself when the students are doing it so that you get a sense of whether or not they were doing okay. Because as you probably noticed here, unless I have the students take a picture or type their responses somewhere and submit it to me, it's just for them to know. I don't necessarily get a copy of this unless I ask for it and have them turn it in. Whereas if we use some of these technology tools, a lot of them will collect data for us and we'll be able to get a report. So this is one of those step back and breathe a moment, because I don't want the stress to build up. This is a resource to consult when you're ready and to use judiciously. There are many tools on here. You should not use them all. You should look at the resource and choose what works for you. So this is a matrix of formative assessment tools that you have access to. I maintain this matrix and add to it whenever I learn a new one. You will sometimes see some references to things that are in my school district, because I do need to mostly, make sure that I am working and supporting the needs of my school district. But for the most part, they're tools that are available to everyone. And what you see here is this matrix actually helps you know what kinds of features each of these tools have. And some of you have heard of these, like GymKit, GoFormative, Google Forms, Mentimeter, Pear Deck, Plickers, Poll Everywhere, Quizalize. They're in alphabetical order. So Quizlet, Socrative, Edpuzzle, they're all here, right? There's more, but there's a lot here already for you. And they let you be able to make a good decision about which tool will meet the needs that you and your students have right now, because you have these checkbox columns that let you know what kinds of questions you can ask. Can you put an image in the question? Can you put a video in the question? Can students draw as a response? Can you push the content to Google Classroom? And so on. So although this does look like a lot, please, please, please do not feel like you have to use all these tools. The point of a resource like this is actually to ensure that you are able to make a choice that works for you and your learners regarding what tools would work for you at this time. So this is linked in your slide deck so that you can access it. Once you have the PDF version of this, you'll be able to click that link.
There is a whole cluster of questions, however, around the idea of how do you put together that lesson? And your prior slide really gives that advice of chunking and thinking of the checks for understanding, and then the learner's reflection. And sort of, could you just give us a little sense of the balance of how that fits into what you would call a lesson? Many people are saying, is this something that happens, have you given us a whole week? Or is it like one
maybe.
And just think about that planning piece with that the slide with the advice about content checks and reflection. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. What's funny is, in a way, this could be a week, especially in this new format. The reason I say that is, in a lot of our school systems and districts, we've been instructed to provide a certain amount of learning that is over the course of a day or a week. And sometimes it depends on your school system, whether or not, you're posting one new lesson a week, followed by an additional 30 minutes, 1 hour, hour and a half of practice opportunities. So whether or not this is one lesson for a week kind of depends a little bit on the parameters being established by the school system in which you work. This is the second one that you saw with the introduction to how to say things that I do would be the beginning of that lesson. So it would be the first in a series of lessons on how to talk about people's activities on a day-to-day basis. It would probably be one that I could do two videos in a given week, one for the I form and one for the informal U, so that there'd be a little bit of a lesson. If it doesn't always happen to be on a Monday, right? We all know that, but let's say it was. So a little bit of that lesson on Monday, and then some practice activities for them just with the I form, and then a lesson on Wednesday with how to now approach this to say what you do, and some practice activities for Thursday, Friday, depending on how much access my students have. And this also depends on the information you have about your learners. Learners who are experiencing poverty and so on might not have as much access to devices readily. If you're in a situation where you have a high or total percentage of learners who actually have access to their own device on which to do work, you might even be able to get a third mini lesson, because as you saw, this lesson could be quite short. A third mini lesson in on that week where you would introduce how to ask questions with with the informal you, so that they've learned in that 1 week, but split up into 3 mini lessons. They've now learned how to talk about activities they do, how to talk about how to say what you do, and then also how to ask questions with what you do, so that they can now start to have a short conversation that is well within the novice range, using memorized chunks and words and phrases in order to ask and answer questions and provide information about themselves. And that would be all within that 1 week, because you want to build in time for them to have some practice opportunities that are multiple and varied, in order to practice each of those little mini concepts. So I think, yes.
That's perfect, Nicole. And I think that helps all of us reflect now, how does this apply to my situation? Because with everyone on this particular webinar, everyone's school situation is different. They may have 1 synchronous session a week, or none, or 5.
Yes.
So you're giving us a lot of good advice for us now to reflect and think, how can I apply this in my situation? So take us forward.
Okay. And actually, I do want to hop onto something you said there. Some systems are doing synchronous and some are not. So although that's not the focus of this session, one of the things you can also do is you can use, when you're ready for another technology tool, don't do it until you're ready. You can actually record yourself. So for example, I could record this presentation I'm doing right now, and it would capture me talking as I hit the next or enter key on my keyboard, and that would make a video lesson that then I could share out using whatever method I have chosen to use in order to share content with my learners. So it could be synchronous. It could be what's called asynchronous, such as a video lesson. So we're going to try to do a short demo of another way you can check for understanding. Now, this tool, some of you, there's a lot of you in this room, so some of you may have already used it. This is something that is a little bit, it's not terribly more advanced because they create templates for you, but it's designed to work alongside of Google Slides or PowerPoint. I use it with Google Slides, and that's how I'll be modeling it today. And what it's designed to do is to fold in a variety of types of checks for understanding for you. And the really nice part is it will actually send your presentation out to your learners' devices. They don't have to be in the room with you. And then give them these interactive slides that pop up. So you saw me demonstrate a check for understanding that I had to tell them, you know, pause the video, do the thing maybe on paper, and then maybe you send me a picture of it, maybe you don't. When you're ready to add a new step to that, this type of tool will allow you to send the presentation out to them, and they'll actually get a slide that they can type or draw on, and you'll get a copy back of what they did, and they will get they'll have the ability to get a copy of what they did. Now, this tool is called Pear Deck, so some of you may have used it already. It is freemium, meaning there's a free version and a paid version. So for right now, one of the things you can do, it has a 90-day free trial of the pro version, which will take you up through the end of your school year for most of you. So you could do that in order to get the full access to everything that is available with Pear Deck. So it is an add-on, which is like a little mini program that you can attach to Google Slides or to PowerPoint in order to give it more functionality. Remember that this is not something to try the first time you try to do a Google Slide or PowerPoint deck. If Google Slides or PowerPoint are new to you, stick with what we did earlier today for now. Do that for a couple of weeks at least, and then add a new tool. So what would have happened is in your slides, you would have received a slide that says to write the most important thing you've taken away so far, and it would have given you a writing space. Then I would be able to actually show those to everybody if I wanted to, or I could decide not to show them. It also has drawing features where people can draw or type anywhere on a given slide, so that you would actually have drawing tools or typing tools available. So your students could actually receive this deck and then have those drawing or typing tools available to them. And you would be able to see what they drew and typed. And of course, they can see it With the full version, which again, you can start a 90-day trial of, with the full version, they get back something called takeaway slides, where they receive back the slide deck with everything they typed or drew in, instead of just the blank version that you see here. And you also get a copy of everything that your students did. There's another type of slide called a draggable. So they have all these, they have these templates ready done for you. And so this draggable slide will let your students drag a dot that appears in the lower part of the screen to an answer that appears higher. And there's even ways where you can put an image on the background and have them fill it in or identify parts of it. So they could label images by using the drawing slides and so on. So the way that it works is that you actually launch Pear Deck, and then you can access these template slides, which you can insert at any point in your deck. So there are a variety of kinds of slides available, including slides specifically for world languages, which are editable. They are fully editable. You can change the pictures, you can change the text, and so on. So if I put this slide into my presentation, hold on, it's still working, it's building the slides. Okay. And it says the students can draw anywhere on the slide, which would allow them to draw a line from citron vert to the lime, and from framboise to the raspberry, and so on. And so it has all these templates, and all you have to do is click on one, and it's there for you. If you like it the way it is, you're done. If you need to change something, you could type anything you want, like faites correspondre, and then you could keep typing, right? Whatever it is you need to type. So you could change these, you can change out the images and replace them with other images, type over the words, and so on. So once you install it, it's very easy to add really interactive and interesting content that your students can use as checks for understanding, and that will give you information back as well regarding how well your students did with those tools, or with that information. So we're going to finish up with some tools that actually help develop the modes of communication by providing practice opportunities. This is where it becomes and get increasingly important to really be strategic about the tools that you choose. Because our field involves developing a great variety and array of skills, almost by necessity, it already means that in this distance learning situation, we're going to have to use several kinds of technologies, maybe more than other teachers of other subjects have to do. So it's a really good idea to start with one tool for each mode of communication, because there are a ton of tools out there, but you simply can't try to go from 5 different tools for interpretive listening and 10 tools for presentational writing. You're going to need to limit yourself initially and maybe start with one. And then in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe you then expand and add another one. And this isn't even an exhaustive list. This is a similar matrix to the one I shared earlier for formative assessment, but it's specific to more open-ended practice tools. And then what I wanted to share for you are a couple of examples of tools you could use across the modes of communication, because one of our big challenges isn't just communicating out our new lessons to our learners, but giving them opportunities to build their skills, practice their skills, and really get to the point where they own that new language and can use it in culturally appropriate ways for whatever situation they find themselves in. So obviously, if you're having synchronous meetings, you can use Google Meet or Zoom to practice interpersonal speaking. Your students can also call each other, but you may or may not be able to capture that, depending on how sophisticated your learner's knowledge of technology is, in order to hear it and give them feedback. There is a relatively new tool called extempore, extempore, that's how they like to pronounce it, extempore. And one of the nice things that it will do, and I'm going to pop over to the tab I have ready for that for you. One of the nice things that it will do is, for those of you who are working on continuing to prepare your learners for the AP exam, it will actually allow you to create a simulated conversation with the time limit where they get a certain amount of time to hear the various questions, and they only have a certain amount of time to respond before it sends them off to the next question. So I'm going to share just a quick video that kind of shows the overview of how you set up an activity. And then the slide deck has a link to help you get started. Okay.
Hi, my name is Sam Slagle with Extempore. I will be your guide to help get you started, and then I'll also be sending some tips and tricks along the way, just to make sure you're getting the most out of Extempore. So to get started, this is going to be a very basic walkthrough, not necessarily using any of the advanced parameters, which are what allows for the collection of spontaneous responses from your students. So to start, we're just going to log in and we're going to have no class. So we will create our first class. So we will just say first class. And next, we will create our assessment.
Now remember, it doesn't have to be an assessment. This could be a formative tool, but they're all called assessments here.
We'll just say first assessment. And then we can set the start time, the due time. Keep in mind that students can always submit responses after the due time, but it will be labeled as a late response so that you can handle it accordingly. Next, you can choose how you want to collect these responses, whether it's audio or video from your students. So for this one, we will collect a video response.
So I hope you noticed there, this is one of the tools that will let your students submit a video or even audio, which for us is particularly important.
And then the parameters, that'll come in more of the advanced
So
lessons.
I will show you that now, but you can see here that now it's going to prompt you to add the questions. And in your question, in your question, you can also add audio or video, or you can upload a file. So if you have an authentic audio that you would like them to respond to, and you have that saved on your device, you're going to be able to upload that audio file and use that as a media prompt. You can provide text as well. And I'm going to back out of their little video. And they actually have here, so if I started creating, oh, of course it does. French 1A Naditz. All right, next. So when you are getting ready to get going and you create your classes, it essentially will give you an opportunity to craft that question and even to set up those parameters where you can designate that kids have 15 seconds to respond to the question before it's going to push them to the next question. So how long do they have to listen? You choose a limit time if you need one. How long do they have to respond? Are you going to let them re-record, or do you want it to be truly spontaneous? So if you need it to be spontaneous, the answer is no. If you need it to be a limit, you can put your limit in so that it's only, the minimum is 15 seconds, it looks like, or the max, yeah, and so on. And then you'll go to next, and you're going to be able to give that, you'll be told you have to give that assessment a name and so on. But language teachers are finding this tool incredibly useful right now as a way to practice interpersonal speaking in a simulated context, given that we are faced with this distance learning situation. So it's one of the few tools that will let you kind of give them questions to answer and give them a way to have to listen and answer, and then you can give them feedback. The other kind of tool for your modes that I would like to take you to is, I think we're going to the interpretive mode next. So for the interpretive mode, for reading, if you haven't tried it already, I have found Edgy to be a fabulous tool for language teachers and their learners because it's what's called a collaborative annotation tool. So when you create an activity in Edgy, you're going to put in an authentic text and or, because you can do both or one or the other, and or an image, which could be an infographic or just an image from somewhere in the world where your target language is spoken. And your students can annotate it. And what's really nice about the annotations is that as the teacher, you can decide if students can annotate by selecting words or phrases and typing an annotation, like sharing a new word that they understand now because they got it in context, or finding key vocabulary that your class has been practicing and and annotating it to say, here's one word that I found that's from our key vocabulary, and so on. So so the other thing though is that they can annotate with speaking. If you turn that on, they can actually annotate with speaking. And so if I launch one of them right now, if I launch one of them right now, you'll see that there's instructions provided. I'm going to turn off heat vision for a second. Oops. I'm going to turn off heat vision. That's a very special feature that I think you'll like. And then as people look at a text, they select a word or a whole phrase. They can add a new comment. They can, I chose that they could type, use emojis, or record something. So for now, I'm just going to type because I already have the microphone running, so it won't work right now. But whatever I'm going to say here, this is important. So we're going to save that comment. Okay, now there's a comment and so on. I can also insert questions throughout the text, and the students can respond with whatever parameters I provide when I set up the assignment. By the way, oddly enough, the audio does not work on phones yet, which is counterintuitive. They do have to be on a Chromebook or a computer to use the audio function. And as you can see, you can put in images, and to annotate on an image, they would just click on it, and it will give them the opportunity to type a new comment, or to audio record a comment, or to use an emoji, because I authorized all three when I created the assignment. When they are done looking at it, you can actually turn heat vision on, and what it will do for the students, you want it off the first time they do it. What it will do is it will give a color-coded kind of heat map that shows which words or phrases were highlighted the most and what comments everybody said. And you can allow people to reply to each other's comments, so that now they're having an ongoing conversation about this text. They're continuing to dive into the text. They read it once and left their own comments. Now they're going to read it a second time, because they're going to look at the comments of their classmates, and they're going to provide additional commentary. And we have some data showing which things were highlighted the most. I haven't used this one in training very much, so it doesn't have a very rich heat map, but once your students start doing it, you'll see which words or phrases are really grabbing their attention. Or if you ask them to look for key vocabulary, you'll be able to see at a glance how much of the class got it, because you'll be able to see with the heat map that, wow, this was a key word and it's in deep red. Everybody found it. So I do recommend you have heat vision off the first time, because the students are distracted by each other's highlights and comments. So I'm the teacher, so I can still see everybody's. But when a student is looking at it, they would not see any of these other ones or these little bubbles until you turn heat vision on. So this is a great tool. My practice tools matrix that is linked in this slide deck for you is similar to the formative assessment tools one. It always provides a how-to resource or a help document, as well as some information about what kinds of features the tool like Edgy has. And then for let's see what it says. Oh, interpretive listening. We have a couple of really good tools. A lot of people have heard of Edpuzzle. It's a tool that lets you take a video either from your computer or from YouTube or other sources, and basically insert questions that stop the video and cause the learners to have to think about what they heard and answer a question. The good news is another tool has come out called Fluent Key that lets you do the exact same thing, except it's really, really well designed for world languages. So there's already a lot of content in world languages. So in this particular video, this is an authentic video called, it's a little part of a series of 2 minutes of history in French. And I've already added one question here where you see the orange dot. Now, if I play the video, I've got my play bar set right here, although it looks like it's still loading. We'll see what happens. It might have kicked me out because I preloaded it. Let's see.
Napoléon devint l'homme le plus puissant de France et même d'Europe. Napoléon a créé la Banque de France en 1800.
I can say, that's it. I want to put a question here. I'm going to click Insert Question. I'll go ahead and leave it as multiple choice. But you could actually choose from other kinds of, notice how many question types you have. Matching, scramble, put in order, fill in the blank. It's a fabulous tool. There's even video or audio recording if you pay for the full version of this, which they are, of course, also offering a trial so that you can try the full version. So if I do multiple choice and I say, in what year, oh, bad typing. Now you might want to type these in your target language. Did Napoleon create the Banque de France? And I might even wait to place that question until this is done, because they're going to talk about 3 things that Napoleon did, and that would force my students to have to listen a little bit more, because I'm only asking about the Banque de France, but this slide or this piece of the video actually talks about 2 other things he did. I'm going to put in my answer choices. I'm going to say 1700, which would be silly because he wasn't born yet, 1800 or 1900. And now I'm going to choose 1800, which is the correct answer. Hold on, it's being a little bit slow. So normally you would then mark your correct answer, and you could keep on going in that way until you are ready to assign this to your learners. And then your learners would have this authentic video along with, yeah, it's being very slow. There we go. Along with the questions that you have interspersed in all of those question formats that are possible. And in fact, I can, I think, drag this out a little bit further. Oops. My Zoom tools are in the way, and maybe move that question to another location. So that's a great tool for interpretive listening, and it has a bank of videos. They are excellent at curating videos for teachers of languages. But if you don't see a video you need, or maybe they don't have the language you teach, you can bring in content, authentic video content yourself, and then insert the questions that way. And then if you want to look at presentational speaking, I'm going to share the same tool for both presentational speaking and presentational writing. Many of you have heard of Flipgrid and Seesaw for speaking, but I did give links to those if you're not familiar with them, and they are in my practice tools matrix, you know, to help you know what you can do with those tools. Adobe Spark is a little less known. Also presentational writing, many of you have heard of Google Docs and Slides, but you could also use Adobe Spark. So remember what we were saying. Start with one tool. For presentational writing, maybe you just let them write on Google Docs right now, right? But when you're ready, a couple of weeks from now, you might want to experiment with Adobe Spark. Adobe Spark has a great series, 3 great tools. Spark Post is how I created that little remember thing that you saw earlier in my slide deck. I also have created certificates. You can create all kinds of things. So what it's good for is an image-rich, simple document with only a little bit of text. So really good for novice language users because it's highly focused on visuals, but allows them to really make full use of their memorized words and phrases on the topics that you're working on. So it has an editing interface that lets you choose variations in themes and colors and different kinds of text and so on. So Post is great as a presentational writing tool. Obviously, your more advanced learners can use it as well, but I would start using this with my novice learners. I'm going to go back and tell you the other 2 kinds it has. For your more proficient writers, you could actually do, oh, they changed it to web page instead of page, but Adobe Spark web page is a single page website that your learners can create and then share with you via a link. So if they have been studying a topic in depth, I was typing all kinds of gibberish on this. So if they've been studying a topic in depth, they can choose a picture to be in the background while the content slides. You can insert video, which means this could be a multimedia project and the video could be them talking, right? And you can insert text of all kinds, and you could have a lot more text. Obviously, they could write whole paragraphs if they're at a proficiency range where they can do that. So that's Adobe Spark page. It's designed to be a single page website, and then they can share that via a link. It also has a really easy editor. It's designed to be something that's doable by people who don't consider themselves techie, right? So it's designed to be pretty easy. And then Adobe Spark Video essentially acts a little bit like Google Slides or PowerPoint, except that, let me go back to a sample one, except that it is designed to have audio on it, either recorded audio with the microphone for speaking, which is what we want as language teachers, or music, or both. They can layer music over their, oh, it doesn't have one of my sample ones in this account, over their slideshow. So they can pull in images and video, arrange them in order, and then add their own narration. If they want to, they can put music on the background, and it will combine that whole thing into a video that could be used for presentational speaking. So it actually prompts the kids or the students or you to give it some kind of give it some kind of starting thing, and then you go to next, and it's going to allow you to pick a template, but you can still edit an awful lot within that. And even then, you're noticing I don't need a lot of tech savvy in order to do this, but it will give you some quick tips to get started in case you need them. So the first time you use any of the tools, it will actually prompt you to maybe watch a little video to help you get started. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm ready. And then as you can see, you have a place here where you can add video, add text, add a photo, add an icon, choose some layouts that you might like. And then you have a little time bar across the bottom as you add new slide content. You can drag it around. You can record your audio, which I can't do right now because my microphone's being used by Zoom. And then you can save that entire thing either to your computer, or you can share it via a link. So they could just put that in Google Classroom for you, for example. And now you would have a multimedia presentation with your students speaking. So we want to make sure that we prepare our learners, not just with new instruction, but with rich and multiple opportunities to practice. And some of these might even lead to some assessment opportunities, which is another big ask of all of us in the classroom right now, in terms of not only how are we going to teach, but how are we going to gauge how well our students are doing with the essential learning targets that we have decided to focus on.
And Nicole, you're taking a breath.
Yes, because I think you might maybe have a question or two you'd like me to answer before we wrap up.
Well, actually, there are a lot of very specific questions, and I think just to answer them in general, it is that all of these tools have a variety of features, a variety of limitations, as well as opportunities in using them. And I think you would share the same advice that for any of these tools that you've shared, it's really important that an educator look at them and see, how can I use this tool to accomplish what I want to accomplish? And how can I enable my students to use them?
Yes.
Some of those questions are so very, very specific that I don't think we can answer them all right now.
No.
Again, by exploring the tool, I think each of us will answer our own specific questions.
And I think, if I'm sorry to jump in, but I think this tool is not, this matrix is not the same matrix that I showed you earlier. I have one for tools like Quizlet and Kahoot and so on. And then I have one for practice tools like Edgy, Flipgrid, Seesaw, Pear Deck, Extempore, Fluent Key, and so on. And I do need to add Adobe Spark to this, I see, so I'll take care of that for you. But again, this will help you, as Paul was saying, first of all, you don't want to overwhelm yourself. So if you have existing tools you're already comfortable with, for them to gauge their presentational writing, speaking, interpersonal speaking, and also their interpretive listening and reading, start there for now. Use what you have. Get comfortable with the distance learning scenario for a couple of weeks. And then maybe you come to this page again and you check out the features of these various tools in order to choose the one that is going to meet the needs of you and your learners. Obviously, you do have a link to the tool, and then you also have a how-to resource for how to get started. But you can also reach out usually to the tool itself. You can Google how to do things, and you will even be able to reach out to people within your teaching community and so on in order to get additional assistance. So I highly recommend that, exactly like Paul said, please be selective in the tools that you choose to use. You are not supposed to try to use them all. That's not actually the point. There's no bonus points for using every tech tool available. Really, the bonus points come with using tools selectively and strategically. So.
And here's one final thought from one of the people on our webinar, saying no matter when we get back into session, there may be a chance that there's another school closure. Yeah. And really all of these teaching skills, as we are preparing ourselves to be skillful users of technology, should really be important to include in our regular face-to-face teaching as well. And then moving in and out of face-to-face or not online teaching is going to be so much smoother, because we will have already engaged our learners with a variety of tools, which also, it's a wonderful way to say it's not all teacher controlled. You are really engaging them, so that a lot of the questions that were asked about, well, how do I keep them engaged? And what about the online translators? And how can I really will have already been dealt with because you've
Yeah.
created your learners as co-learners and co-constructors
Yeah.
of the learning.
Yeah, in the online translators, obviously we all do, we talk to our learners about them. And one of the things I say that I have found is different from some people, it's not that the online translators are necessarily bad. The problem is you have to already be proficient in order to use them as a tool, and that's why they aren't good for you as a learner. You don't know when it is sending you astray because you don't have enough proficiency in the language yet in order to use it as a tool. You're still building your language, building your proficiency, and building your understanding of the impact and importance of the cultural context to the message. And you need to practice and build those skills so that eventually one day when you are at that range of proficiency where someone might be asking you to, for example, do a translation for something, yes, you might be able to actually effectively use a tool like that to help you get started because you know enough about the language and the culture to know where it went wrong and fix it. And it can truly be a tool. And that helped, at least in my setting, that helped students understand that I wasn't trying to take things away from them. I wasn't trying to make them feel bad and feel like they were cheating. I was really trying to help them see who they were as learners and where they sit in the language learning kind of continuum compared to where these translation tools sit. Because at a time, a while ago, Google Translate was horrible. As all of us have seen, it's definitely not perfect. It definitely makes mistakes, but it is far better than it used to be. And it's very obvious when students use it because it speaks the language at a range, it provides sentences that don't make sense for the range that our students are working in many cases. But when my students realized the reason why I was saying no, and that it wasn't just a management disciplinary reason, even if that was maybe part of it, that there was this whole other layer of understanding what the tool is and how it's used and who can use it appropriately and why it's important for them to not do that yet, that really seems to help. Will it mitigate everybody who wants to do that? Nope, absolutely not. And that's where we as teachers look at the language that they turn in sometimes, and we're able to actually go find it word for word by Google translating exactly what we think they said. And we have to have that conversation with them about the importance of developing their language skill because they don't really know what those sentences mean or what they truly said or when those sentences would be appropriate. So I do think that for specifics on these tools, I know we couldn't do specifics tonight, but there is a lot of access and help for you and resources to help you get started. But the key is to go back to designing for learning, right? It has to all be about the learning and what will support your learners as we move forward. And yeah, potentially move forward into scenarios where we are doing some modified version of distance learning, even after this initial shutdown ends.
All right, Nicole, as you're ready to take us to your final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, really, I just want to thank everybody for being here this evening. As I said at the beginning, this is truly a heavy, heavy lift. And I know every one of you has felt that. And the fact that you chose to spend even more time after probably being online all day today, and also doing the incredible amount of work you're doing to design these learning experiences. I really appreciate your time here this evening. I hope, truly my hope is that something this evening has been helpful to you. It is not my expectation that everything I said was helpful. That's actually not generally how these things work. But I do hope that given all of your expertise and everything that you've been doing and working on, I hope there has been something this evening that has made it that much more helpful for you as you move forward into your next kind of series of weeks in this distance learning situation, whether that was something about lesson design, whether that was something about a specific tool that you might use. I do hope you walk away with something that you're eager to try or eager to put in place because you think it will really support the work that you are doing with your learners.
Nicole, that is definitely the sentiment being expressed in multiple comments. I would sum it with the one that I'm reading that says, thank you. I am now seeing we have as many opportunities as we have challenges with online teaching and learning. So thank you. And thank you for all of these very practical ideas. We simply say merci mille fois, Nicole. And
de rien, c'était un plaisir.
To every language educator, we thank you for all that you are doing for your learners today and every day. You know they need you now more than ever. And please
Yes.
continue to visit www.actfl.org, and also where you will see announcements for additional webinars to support you in your work. Thank you for learning tonight with ACTFL.